Well, good day to everyone, and thank you so much for attending one of our first webinars of the year, well, at least one of mine for the year. And I hope you had a great end of your 2018 and had a wonderful 2019 so far. Here at ManageEngine, especially the Active Directory Solutions team, we have some big plans for 2019. And as you see, we have moved into certainly the hybrid Active Directory infrastructure phase, and we'll be helping you as you, if you haven't moved to your hybrid Active Directory infrastructure, getting you there, and then also those of you that have made the move, we'll be helping you better understand how to secure and manage your infrastructure. We actually have a four-part series. This is the first of those four. We have another webinar tomorrow, another one Thursday, and then hop over into next week and have a webinar on Tuesday. So we have four webinars on this securing your hybrid Active Directory infrastructure series. I hope you can join with all of them. But of course, we are recording all of these, so if you unfortunately have to step away, if you miss one, we will be sending out a link to the recordings within a day or two in an email to you. So please keep an eye out for that. We do encourage that you share the link with other people in your organization or colleagues, because we know that not everybody has seen our emails or know about these, but we feel that the information is pretty critical for everyone to get. So please share those links with everyone. Also, some housekeeping. I'm not the only one that is here today from my team. There's actually someone in the background answering your questions. So if you do have any questions in line as we go through, don't hesitate to ask those questions. Just use your GoToWebinar panel, and you'll be able to ask some questions through the Q&A part of your panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And they will be answered within. If for some crazy reason we don't get to all the questions, which has happened, we will be sending an email out to you with an answer to your questions after the webinar. I think that pretty much handles all the logistics. As a introduction, my name is Derek Melber. I will be your presenter as well as moderator for the entire webinar. Just to give you a little bit of information about who I am. I am the Chief Technology Evangelist for the AD Solutions team here at ManageEngine. And really what that means is I get the great opportunity to travel the world, answering questions from administrators and helping organizations better understand Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and their infrastructure dealing with identity management and access. I am an MVP. I've been an MVP now for, gosh, I guess it's going on 19 years. I've been an MVP both in Active Directory and in group policy. Currently, I'm on the Active Directory side, which isn't called Active Directory really anymore, but certainly that's my area of expertise. I do want to go over some resources that are available to you. All these resources that I'm going to show you are absolutely free, and they're available from our website. So I'm going to send you out to our website now, and I'm going to go over some of these resources. If you come to our main landing page, just ManageEngine.com, and hover over support, you will see that this has changed. If you go to here, that's interesting. Let's see if we can get to our blogs. So I know it used to be blogs.manageengine.com. And if you go to blogs.manageengine.com, you should be able to get to our blog page. So here, this is where we post all of our blogs and where you can gain access to that information. This is actually a pretty powerful location for you. We on the AD Solutions team, we actually blog about once a week, sometimes more. And if you want to come in and say, for example, look up something related to Active Directory, security, whatever it is, You'll see that we post information out here about our webinars, about information, and this is a great way for you to keep in touch with us here at ManageEngine. So that's one thing that I wanted to point you to. Another one is our security hardening site. So if you come here to our main landing page again and hover over products, in the lower portion here, you'll see security hardening for Active Directory. This is a excellent website that was created just a couple of years ago, and it guides you through the whole concept of securing your Active Directory infrastructure. At the bottom here, you'll see all of these areas, and these are the areas that you typically have to focus on, whether it be for just security hardening, but also it relates to auditing. So if you have any type of audit responsibilities, compliance, which I know everyone does, this is a great place to come to learn how to create audit reports and make sure that you stay compliant for all these different areas within Active Directory. So those are some different resources that are available to you off of our website. Another resource which is pretty good is, this is about a year old now, is our Securing Privileged Access and Active Directory Dummies book. Come here, anywhere you see this on our website, click on it, and you can get a free copy, a PDF of that particular book. The book, in my opinion, is an excellent thing for you to share with others in your organization, to get them to understand the importance of privileged access. Obviously, when we start looking at the overall picture of security within organizations, this is something that is very important, and we need to secure privileges whenever possible. Finally, we have our 2019 World Tour, which is just kicking off. Last year, we went to about 30 different countries, always increasing the number of countries per year. This will be our 6th year of doing these World Tour events, and I got to tell you that the synergy around these World Tour Active Directory seminars is pretty awesome. And to give you an idea of how you can find out where we'll be, again, if you come back to our main ManageEngine landing page and go all the way down here to events, you can look to see where the events are. So you'll come in here. This year we're naming it the Cybersecurity and Hybrid Identity Management Seminar. We will be in Australia the 12th, and then I know that I will be in New Zealand starting on the 14th. We will be doing a swing to the United States, I think in the March or April time frame. Let's see if I can find that for you here. You obviously can come in here and find it yourself. If I can't find it right here off, you'll see I'll be in Germany. And we don't have that yet on the website. So this is a great place to come. As I mentioned earlier, and I'll do this at the end of the webinar, this is also where you can come and register for the other webinars that are in the series. So come in here, find the webinars. You'll see here, this is the one for tomorrow. Click on it, and you can register from this location as well. That way, you get emails which will have you set up to get the link to the recording. So please do that. For those of you that aren't aware of our World Tour event, it is a half-day event geared towards solutions. What we do at the end of the year is we sit down and we think about all the questions, think about all the trends that are going on that we got in 2018 and what is trending for 2019, and we put together an agenda. And this year, I think the agenda is pretty powerful, as we will continue to talk about management. We will continue to talk about efficiency and security all around a hybrid environment, and really getting you to understand the importance of a hybrid environment and how that fits into the overall picture of where you are today and where you will be in the next couple of years. So that kind of gives you some ideas on some resources for after our webinar. I will end up and tell you that please email me. I love to receive emails. Right there is my email address. I'll also have it at the end. It's a great way for me to learn. It's a great way for me to keep in touch with you. And if you have questions, me being an MVP gives you an upper hand because if I don't know the answer, certainly I can find someone that can get us the answer. So please send me your questions as we go through the year through my email. All right, let's move on and start talking about our content. I want to kind of give you an idea of this idea of hybrid and why it's so important. And I also want to dive in and talk about detecting changes within your hybrid environment for privileged access. Obviously, we've had Active Directory on-prem for a long time, but as we move into a world where we're on-prem and in the cloud, we have some different things that we need to consider. So I want to show you how to set up detecting for privileged access. And then I want to focus on-prem, and then I want to focus on Azure Active Directory. So that's kind of the premise for today. And again, if you have any questions, post it to the Q&A there in your GoToWebinar. So let's first of all talk about how to protect or how to detect changes to privileged access within your hybrid environment. Now that we've moved into a new world, we have to consider both on-prem as well as Azure Active Directory, because I can administer in both locations and I have a totally different infrastructure as I move from one to the other. Obviously, Active Directory has been around for 19 years. Azure's been around for a handful of years. So we have to understand the differences between them and what's capable between them. Regardless, we have basically a concept called auditing set up within a Windows environment that is going to track behavior as well as actions. So behavior is going to be things that we do, access, authentications, which might be also considered actions, but actions, in my opinion, are going to be the creation of users. It is going to be access to resources. So auditing is going to be the tool that we utilize to do that. Now, on an on-prem Active Directory environment, there is no auditing enabled by default. So we're not auditing anything of what's going on within Active Directory. Now, in order to set this up, you're going to go into Group Policy and set up either the audit policy or the advanced audit policy. So let's jump into my live environment here and let me show you where that's located. So I'm going to come in here to Group Policy, and I have a GPO that has been created to set up my auditing. And if we come here under Computer Configuration, Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, my local policies, you'll have the audit policy. So this is kind of the old way of doing things. This has been around since Windows NT. And this is where you come in and you set up tracking specifically to do your directory service access as well as your logon information. But a newer way to do this is to come down here to my advanced audit policy configuration. And my advanced audit policy configuration has a little bit different structure and a little bit different options than the audit policy. But if you see for example, directory service access, I have more granular control of what I want to look at. So if I don't want to look at replication, I don't have to. But if I want to look at AD changes, that's what I can go in here and look at. Now, this whole idea of which one do I use, most of us today are using usually the baseline or the weakest operating system for our domain controllers is Windows Server 2012. But if you do have an older operating system than that, you're going to have to use a mixture of auditing and advanced auditing, because really it was 2008 R2 that Microsoft kind of kicked in this advanced audit policy to be functional. But you can't have a combination of the both. Well, what's the difference? Well, your advanced audit policy actually gives you more information, broader and deeper information about tracking of events. So this is why we recommend that you use this. So this is the way that you go in and you establish tracking of things that are happening in Active Directory, okay? So when we start talking about privileged access, this is one of the things that we want to set up. Now, when you set that up, the results of the tracking of the changes that are occurring show up in your security log. So again, if we jump back into our operating system, and now we head over to our event viewer, here under our Windows log security is where all that information comes into. So So if I look to see that I have 172,000 events strictly for this one domain controller, we can see that this has a lot of information here. And virtually everything that I do inside of Active Directory is being tracked. And so you see this directory service access, and you'll see all of these other logons and whatnot that I'm tracking. So the security log becomes vital for you to be able to look at the information that you're tracking. And what we want to do is leverage that information. Now, if we look at the security log as kind of the endpoint for what we need in gathering these changes, we have some significant limitations. And this is really the crux of what I want to kind of get across today at the beginning, is if we try to use the Microsoft solution, which is setting up auditing and using the event viewer, we're going to have limitations that are going to be big roadblocks for us. First of all, each DC has a unique log. So if I have 10 domain controllers, 20 domain controllers, that means that I have 10 or 20 different logs that I'm going to have to manage. The events are logged where the action occurs. So if I connect to Active Directory using Active Directory users and computers, whichever domain controller I connected to is the one that's going to be where I write, and also it's going to be tracked. I've heard over the last couple of months, again, this concept of a BDC. We really don't have BDCs. Backed up domain controllers was a Windows NT thing, and since 2000, for 19 years, we haven't had BDCs. We have RODCs, but we don't have BDCs. So that concept is kind of thrown out the window, and all of them are writable. Now, I have no search capability inside of the security log, only filtering, which is extremely limited. So we're going to look at this in just a minute on that limitation, and just keep that in mind that it's not easy to get information out of that log. We normally have the log set up to override as needed, and this concept is override as needed is great because it allows us to have a moving set of events going through the log, but it's a first in, first out situation. So if we don't capture the information in time, we lose it. Which of course is something we never want to do, especially in today's security world where we're going to rely on forensics. The logs are not archived by default. And when we do archive them, it's very difficult to get information out of them. So you can see that our roadblocks are significant, because when we start looking at a SIEM solution, which really this is Microsoft's SIEM solution for Active Directory, it has almost none of the features that we need. And the last one there is alerting, which in my opinion as an administrator, that's the most important thing. Because if I'm tracking something, I need to be notified that something happened. And the way that you're going to notify me is not in some type of a dashboard or report, although that's great. I want an email, I want an SMS, I want something that is going to notify me, because if I'm not in front of that dashboard, how am I going to notice something? And with some of today's attacks, time is of the essence, and we need to be notified of those pretty quickly. So this is the on-prem Active Directory way of detecting changes and tracking those changes and getting notifications. Now, as we move into Azure, Azure has a totally different structure. First of all, auditing is enabled by default inside of Azure. Even today, Microsoft has not enabled it inside of on-prem, but they did do it inside of Azure. Now, the results are going to show up in your audit logs in the Azure portal. So if I jump over here to my Azure portal and I come here to Azure Active Directory, you'll see that down here I have my audit logs. So the audit logs pretty much are in line with the same results as you're going to get from the security log and event viewer. So if I can get my audit logs to populate here, which it should, let's see. Obviously, one of the limiting issues of getting through the internet to your information versus on-prem. So here you see that I have my information, and this is really what's happening in my environment. So you can see that Bart has done some activity. Bart changed password, updated the group. So different things have been happening inside of Azure. And this is the log that I have. Now, if we look at the idea of these logs and try to do a comparison to on-prem, what we're going to see is that you can do a search, but each one of them is unique. Now, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by each one of them is unique? Well, you'll obviously see here that I can come in here and search on certain things that are going on. So I can come in here and let's say that I want to look at authorization, and I can apply this, and I can go over the 1 month, and I can see this. Now, as soon as I click and I go, let's say, to the properties of my Azure tenant, and then go back to my audit logs, I have lost that. It did not keep that, okay? And you'll notice here that I really don't have the options to create different views of this particular audit log. Now, that may seem limiting to you, but according to Microsoft, that's not limiting at all. The reason being is that Microsoft is going to suggest that whether you're using on-prem or you're using Azure Active Directory, really doesn't matter to Microsoft. The way that you get information out of these logs is PowerShell. Now, I'm not too certain if you've used PowerShell to try to do this, but it's not a friendly way of doing things. PowerShell itself is complicated, but now when you start having to put in all of these switches and variables to pull information out of these logs on-prem across multiple DCs, it becomes a little complicated. So the issue with trying to work within the Azure environment is a little difficult. Now, there's no alerting associated with the audit logs. You can go into different parts of Azure and try to set up certain triggers, which are going to notify you, but really the audit logs within Azure do not have alerting associated with them. So if I come back in here and I look at that environment, you know, I can click on something, but it just tells me the event. There is no, I guess, view. Hold on one second. That's interesting. So there is no view that allows me to set up alerts. So that, again, is a limitation. Microsoft would say that you can kind of set that up using PowerShell, but again, that's a limitation. So the story here is that Azure is a view, but if you want to do anything with the information, the answer is PowerShell. So if I want to do searches that are the same over and over again that have filters, I want to use PowerShell. If I want to set up alerting, I'm going to use PowerShell. If I'm going to do reporting, I'm going to use PowerShell. So PowerShell is the way within Azure to get things done according to Microsoft. Now, we have this idea of retention, and I just went over the security log issues, and one of the issues that you have inside of Azure Active Directory is the retention of the data. So you'll see here that if I go with the free to basic version of Azure AD, I'm extremely limited on the directory information. In my opinion, even if you go to Premium 2, P2, you're still limited. It's only 30 days. And we've all learned that 30 days is a blip on the radar when we start talking about forensics or trying to get information. I mean, just look at Marriott. Marriott went for 4 years without knowing that they had been compromised. So they had to go back to data for 4 years. So 30 days is almost worthless when we start talking about forensic information. Obviously, for real-time information, 30 days is more than enough. So those are some things that we have to consider when we start looking at the Azure AD audit logs. So that gives you an idea of both of the environments on how you set up of the tracking. So now let's dive in a little bit. Let's talk about what we actually need to look at for privileged access. So for changes to your on-prem Active Directory privileged groups, we first of all have to know which groups to look at. Well, that makes sense. So I'm going to give you 3 categories of groups: the built-in groups, application and service groups, and then custom groups. Let's dive into Active Directory and let me show you what those look like. So here I'm going to come over here to Active Directory users and computers. I'm going to come down here, first of all, to my users container. And here you will see that I have DNS admins, domain admins, enterprise admins, schema admins, right? I also have group policy creator owners. So these are the groups that have privileges within Active Directory. But I also need to come back up here to built-in, there's 2 locations of them, and look at administrators, backup operators, and the like. So these are the built-in groups that I'm going to want to track. I need to know when these things change. Now, the second category were service and application groups, okay? So for my service and application groups, I'm going to come back down here to users, and you will see here that I have a SQL Server group. The SQL Server group is one of many that I'm going to want to track because it has access to SQL Server. And I can have others in here as well. So anytime that I install an application or service, typically it throws it into Active Directory. Now, a third type of group is a custom group, okay? Now, a custom group, that would be something you created on your own, just gave it any arbitrary name. So if I go to IT, you know, this might be my ME admins, right, or my master admins, anything that potentially is in another privileged group or you've given access to directly. The difficulty with knowing or tracking down or getting a report of these is you never know how you gave access. Now, there are many different ways to give access to these groups. One is put a group, custom group, in an existing privileged group. 2, give it delegations like an Active Directory or group policy. 3, give it user rights. I can also give it access to an ACL for resource to a file like a database or something like that. So there's many different ways for it to get privileges, but this is the way for you to track that down. Okay, now that we've got a list of our groups, what we need to do is we need to go in and track them. Now, if we try to do this the Microsoft way, right? So if I come in here to Active Directory and I go to Event Viewer, how am I going to set up a way of tracking just those groups? Because as you'll see here, I can set up custom views of group changes, but the one thing that I cannot do here, and if I go in and show you the filter, I have no way of setting up the detailed group. I have no way of doing that. So this is just the changes to any group, which that's not doing me any good at all. So when I look at using the Microsoft way, I have significant limitations. But if I come in and use a solution that's geared towards actually setting up reporting and alerting and everything, it becomes pretty obvious that I can come in here and I can have reports on privileged groups that are modified. And I can actually go back in history much more than 30 days, and I can look at all of the groups that have been modified over the last 6 months. Now, how did I set this up? Well, I set this up because what I have done is I've set a filter for the particular report. So the filter on the report allows me to view just those groups that I care about. But I don't stop there, because I can also set up alerts. And so my alerts allow me to come in and take a report and then determine which of those groups that I want to look at. So here I just have a modified security group report, and then I'm filtering it just to look at what I need to get alerts. Now, what does this look like on the other end? Well, let me show you. So if someone comes in and they modify, let's say, the schema admins. So they come in and they add someone to the schema admins group. Well, if I'm using Microsoft technologies, how in the world am I going to be able to track that down? I mean, it just becomes cumbersome. I can't search for schema admins. I can't do any of that. So, and I want an alert. Well, this isn't going to give me that level of detail. But if I come in here to what I set up in AD Audit Plus, well, I already have an alert here on the dashboard. My phone is already vibrating with an SMS or an email, because this is a TrueSIM tool that allows me to see what's going on and alert in real time for the privileged access changes that are occurring in Active Directory. So I can set up reports and alerts so that I can see that information. But we need to go beyond just privileged groups, because yes, privileged groups are important within on-prem Active Directory, but we also have service accounts. Now, we all know what service accounts are, right? So if I come back here to my machine and I go into services, my Windows services, service accounts are those that are configured as log on as, okay? So if I come in here, you'll see that I have some service accounts. Well, how many servers do you have? 100, 500, 10,000? Well, some of you have a lot of these things, so how are you going to document all of your service accounts? So that's what you have to do first, document your service accounts. Well, my recommendation is to use our free AD Manager tool to document service accounts. So from our main landing page, download the tool. It's absolutely free. And then you install it. And once it's installed, it looks like this. So I have the free tool installed. Let me get to my desktop to show you. And here you see AD Manager free tools. Super simple to use. Click on Service Account Management. Go to Service Accounts. Select all the machines that you want to grab your service accounts from, and then go get service accounts. There's no agent here. You use credentials, so it'll be like a domain admin type of account that has access to all those servers. So it goes and queries all those machines and pulls back the services that are configured, and you see those here. Okay? Now you'll see many of these are like built-in service accounts, and we don't care about those. So we gave you the ability just to search on what you want. So this becomes a very powerful way for you to document all those service accounts, absolutely free. Now, you can also pump that out to a CSV file. So once you have all of your service accounts documented, what you want to do is put those into AD Audit Plus so that you can get alerts on them if they change. Now, this is a very similar process to that we just talked about with your groups. So if I go back in here to my AD Audit Plus configuration, and I go to my alerts, and I look at my alert profiles, you'll see here that I can come in here and look at my service accounts that have been changed. What I did is I said if anything changes with them, if they're deleted, password changes, anything changes with them, I want you to look for these accounts and give me information. So let me show you what that looks like. If someone decides to come in, and let's say they want to disable a service account, where is my disablement? Disable the account. I don't know why the other one that went away, but if I disable this account, again, I have an alert set up for that, and immediately I'm notified. So I can get an email, I can get the information that I need. So again, we cannot rely on just the security log, even though the information goes through it. We can't rely on it because it doesn't give us granular alerting. And it's the granular alerting that we can set up in a TrueSIM solution, which is AD Audit Plus, that gives us an advantage to get real-time alerts on when these critical aspects of our on-prem Active Directory is changing, okay? So those are two examples of your on-prem environment and how to deal with that. Well, what about in Azure? Well, when we move to Azure, we have a little bit different world than what we had in our on-prem Active Directory. Inside of Azure Active Directory, we have things called roles and administrators. Let me show you what that looks like. So here I'm in my Azure tenant. I go to Azure Active Directory, and here you'll see roles and administrators. Now, it's kind of funny they call it administrators, because it's just the name of the role includes administrator, because you'll see my role is a global administrator. Now, if I want to see everybody that's a global administrator, I come in here and you'll see that I have this list, and then I can add a member. I can come in here and delete someone from the list, and this is the way that I get this information. Now, for those of you that have struggled inside of Active Directory users and computers getting reports, the problem has actually been exacerbated inside of Azure Active Directory, because I can't really even get anything out of this without using PowerShell. There is no option to save as or get information out. So this becomes a significant limitation for you when you're inside of Azure. But this is what we have with regard to basically our equivalent inside of Azure to what we had for Active Directory are these roles, okay? So these roles now are the platform for giving someone access. And you can see there's roles everywhere from developers, authentication administrator that can set the authentication method. And the list is pretty huge here, as you can see. So we have user administrator, maybe similar to the account operator inside of Active Directory. And things have changed quite a bit as we go from on-prem into the cloud. But this is a way that we can actually see who has the access. But this isn't a webinar on seeing the access. This is a webinar on detecting changes. So again, any change that occurs, that's going to go through your audit log. And I can come in here, right? I mean, if I come back here to Azure, I can go down here to my, where did my audit logs go? Azure Active Directory. My audit logs are here. And one of the options that you have is for roles. And if I apply this, I can see the roles that have changed. So I've added members to roles. Someone has inside of this tenant. So how do I get alerts on this? Well, you don't alert on this. There are no alerts. There's no alerts on what's going on in here. Again, you can use PowerShell to do that. But what I'm suggesting is that you want to actually use a tool that's designed to do this. So if I jump back here, and actually this time I'm not going to use this, I'm going to use this environment, which is AD Audit Plus, connected to that tenant. And now you can see that I have the ability to see all of these changes that are occurring, and I can associate alerts with virtually everything inside of AD Audit Plus. Okay? So as I come in here and I look at setting up alerts, I can look at the reports that I want to look at. I can look at my cloud environment as well as I can look at my on-prem environment to see the information that's changing. So this is the mechanism that you have to actually see all those aspects of your environment, okay? So you want to go in and you want to set up the different roles and administrators from Azure that you're going to want to track, because these are the way that you give privileges inside of Azure. Now, Azure has another option which is called PIM, Privileged Identity Management, which uses JIT and GIA to elevate your privileges. Unfortunately, that becomes extremely complicated, and if you actually want to see how JIT and GIA works, you can go to our security hardening site, and I have a link to a video on that website that you can click on, and you can see a live demonstration of how to leverage JIT and GIA. I've asked this question around the world, and I'm up to 3 organizations over the last 4 years that I've ever implemented JIT and GIA, at least the thousands that I've come in contact with. So JIT and GIA becomes a very complicated way of doing that, where my recommendation is to control it and just monitor when those things are changed so you know who has privileges at all time. And that's really the overall goal, is being able to monitor the changes, because now you know who has privileges at all time, okay? So using AD Audit Plus, you're able to detect changes to all privileges throughout your hybrid environment, on-prem as well as in Azure. So now you know virtually everywhere who has privileges in your environment. So that gives you a full list of how to set up the tracking of changes, where to go to see the changes, how to get reports on the changes, as well as alerts on those changes, whether it be on-prem Active Directory or your Azure Active Directory environment, okay? So I hope that gives you a good detailed view of privileged access and how you want to track that. As I promised earlier, I was going to jump back into my website and show you how you can register for tomorrow, Thursday, and next Tuesday's event. So come into ManageEngine, the main landing page, scroll all the way to the bottom, go to Events, select Webinars, and then in the webinar, simply click on the webinar that you want. It would be this one. We're going to talk about endpoints tomorrow. Click on this and you can register from here. But of course, don't forget about our blog. Don't forget about our security hardening site, which is extremely valuable as well. So that gives you an idea, our first webinar for 2019. Hopefully it was valuable information to you. A couple of reminders: email me if you have any questions. A couple of questions have come through. I want to thank my colleagues for answering those. I want to thank you for your time. I know your time is valuable. So I'm actually going to send you on your way and let you get back to work. You will be receiving a link to this recorded webinar in the next couple of days. So keep an eye out for that. And until tomorrow, for hopefully all of you that are going to be attending, or the next time I see you live, this is Derek Melber, and for the rest of the AD Solutions team, have a great rest of your day. Thank you.